So I'd like to call this board workshop to order this afternoon. The one agenda item is to hear a presentation from Mr. Mike Hefner concerning a proposed zoning line for the South Lafayette High School.
Thank you, Dr. Aguilar. Good seeing board members that are here. Hope all your holidays were good. Wanted to go over a proposed zone for the new high school over in the south part of Lafayette Parish. Those of you that are looking on the screen and also on the hard copy will see it outlined in the green area.
Excuse me, Mike. Do you have your mic on?
Mm-hmm. I told you wouldn't be able to hear me with that head cold. The zone that you see here is the proposed zone for that particular high school. It's largely carving it out of Como, which is going to be the natural zone because that's the area that's currently going to Como, and a little bit of Lafayette High zone. What you see on your screen, if you can switch it over to the map, can you switch it over to the projector onto their side screen? Because they don't need to see me. Yeah, on theirs. There you go. All right. You see the red lines? Those are what we had worked up for for Tony Trammell to kind of figure out what the traffic planning side of it would be. But I left it on here because it kind of gives you a good idea of the different quadrants and about the number of students that are involved. These are 9 to 12 students based on your September 2015 student database. The students that were enrolled as of that time. I think it was September 15th. For example, in that east quadrant, this blue area right here is where the proposed school would be built. So this east quadrant has 43 9 to 12 students. The north quadrant here has 715. The west quadrant has 483. The south quadrant has 106. Kind of gives you an idea of what the distribution is on your students. You want to actually see what the students are. Let me turn off a couple of these, and that's your student distribution. Those are your 9 to 12s, those dots. So you just kind of get an idea how it overlays on that quadrant, basically where all those students are coming from. The zone, what we tried to do is tried to keep the numbers reasonable to give it some growth ability as time went on. Also to try to use some clean lines. Whenever I'm doing these, I like to try to move away from non-visible boundaries, lines just drawn on a map, to go on something that is visible, something that you can say, okay, if I buy a house here, I'm in this zone. If I buy a house across the street, I'm in another zone. This particular zone that's proposed, basically this is Johnson Street and this is West Broussard Road, or E. Broussard Road. West Broussard's coming here and then it becomes E. Broussard. So we'd follow the center line of E. Broussard up to Vincent Road. And the nursery's right there, that little plant nursery right there. You come up the center line of Vincent Road till you get to Verrott School Road. And we go up the center line of Verrott School Road and we would follow Ambassador Caffrey all the way out to the east side of the parish. Nice, good, clean lines, makes for some good bus routes as far as getting the buses around. You have good east-west and you have good north-south access with regards to your transportation. The heavy line that you see here are your current high school zones. This is the current Lafayette High zone. This would take in this area right here, basically between Ambassador Caffrey and the parish line. In 1984, that area was zoned into Lafayette High because the population had gotten so low at Lafayette High because all the neighborhoods feeding into it had matured out. Kids grew up, moved away. So in 1984, when they did the last high school rezoning, they added this area between Ambassador Caffrey and the parish line. What this would do is have this area south of E. Broussard Road going to the new high school to help make up some of that loss that Como's going to have with the new zone. The area between E. Broussard and Ambassador Caffrey and the river would be zoned for Como. The transportation routes are really good, picking up those kids and getting them over to Como in a timely manner. And then that brings Lafayette High down to a little bit more of a reasonable capacity. And that's one of the problems that we're having to deal with, is that Lafayette High is so overcrowded now. Over the ensuing years with the programs and some of these neighborhoods going through their cycle of new families moving in, kids growing up, making their way to high school. So that would bring the Lafayette High zone into a little bit more compact and drop those numbers down a little bit. These are the way the numbers look right now. These are based on student residency, basically where the students live, and does not take into account any of the programs, the academies and what have you. Those adjustments you're going to see when we do I'll present you numbers for your projection reports. Your projection reports are going to be based on enrollments, kids actually attending a school. But since you may end up moving a program from one school to the next, we usually always do our demographics based on the students that live within that geographic area. So you at least have a good, strong baseline that you can look to. And if you decide you want to add another program to it, then at least you know it's going to be those number of kids in that program in addition to the kids that are zoned for this. Now, these are all Lafayette Parish school students. They're not private and parochial. They're not school-age kids. These numbers are only based on the ones that are in your student database attending Lafayette Parish public schools. So you can see where Lafayette High, the enrollment based on the geographic zone would drop down to 1374. Keep in mind you got over 400 there going there on the various programs. So your actual enrollment's still going to be up around 1900 kids with these changes. Como goes to 1425. Of course, they have their academy. You'd have to add some of that into it. Acadiana is at 2,000. Carencro is at 16, Northside's at 1,000, and the new high school is at 13. We were trying to keep it around 1,400 or less for the initial opening. That would give you some additional wiggle room. Since we were declared unitary in 2006, whereas that DSEG case went away, it's no longer there. We have full local control now. As of 2006, instead of using black and white for our student allocations, we use the socioeconomic factors, and normally that's determined by free and reduced. So free and reduced versus paid is how we generally will allocate our students to kind of get an idea of what we're looking at as far as the profile, the socioeconomic profile of the schools. So I'll include that so you get an idea. For example, I have the 9 to 12 numbers broken out, and then I have the 9 to 12 free and reduced. So that'll tell you, let's just take Lafayette High for an example. Out of the 1,374 students that live within that zone, 677 are free and reduced, or 49.27%. 697 are paid, for an average of 50.73%. So you can see that for any of the others. Acadiana has 2,000, of which 1,284 are free or reduced, or 61%, and 802 are paid, and that's 38% of on your paid students. So that kind of gives you an idea of your socioeconomic profile on your at-risk students, those types of things. So generally, as we move through these zone changes or what have you, I'm going to be tracking these numbers for you. I also break it out by grade level, so if you want to know if that school was open today, how many 9th graders, 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders would go. So those are those grade breakouts. I normally don't include them at this point in time because it just kind of makes the chart much longer. So I usually aggregate them for you for 9 to 12. The proposed high school would be 1,342, of which 422 are free and reduced, or 31%, 920 are paid for 68%. And that pretty much reflects that economic profile for that side of the parish. So that, in a nutshell, is what I would propose to the board to adopt, at least as a working model right now for the draft. Since the school won't open until 2017, what I want to do is load the 2016-17 student data up in that year. We'll look to see if there's any substantial changes. If there are, we may need to tweak it here or there. If there's not, well, then we can move forward toward formalizing this zone, as well as the middle and high school zone adjustments that I'll be coming with y'all to y'all with in the future. But we're going to do this one a little different. A lot of school districts I work with, it's been the elementary that's been kind of the crisis. So we deal with elementary zones. and then I build middle school, and then we build into the high school zone. This one we're going the other way around. We're going to build your high school zones out. We have split middle school zones right now where 8th graders end up, some go to this high school and some go to another high school. We want to try to eliminate some of those split middle schools. And our elementary zones are really fractured. We got a lot of split elementary zones. And that's just a vestige from our DSET case on some of the schools we had to close and finding a place to be able to move those students that helped us further desegregate the school system. But now at this point, since the DSET case is 10 years gone now, it's been 10 years ago that case closed out, we have the opportunity now to clean some of this up, get some of these kids maybe back closer to a neighborhood school, and also help with your transportation costs. Because I can tell you just by looking at the zones, you've got them all over the place. So that's kind of the long-range thing that I'll be working with y'all on as this school year progresses. Are any questions at this point?
Mr. Hefner, I have a quick question on that note. Is this working? It is. Are you able to look at, with our current schools of choice, the potential of, well, the effect of those schools of choice and where the students are coming from, and if large pockets of students for one school of choice, for instance, and just is in one area maybe the consideration of moving those schools of choice?
Yeah, actually I have all that data worked up. I have where your primary schools of choice, your 5 schools of choices. I have where all those students are located right now. And so you can actually see a distribution around the parish on that. So at whatever point y'all want to see that, I do have that already worked up. I was telling Mr. Santani earlier that once I have all this data loaded, it's real easy to be able to do a lot of these calculations and figuring out how many kids, for example, the issue coming up at the board meeting tonight is a 1-mile area around those schools of choice. Well, we're able to do all the demographics for that because I have the data actually loaded up. So it's a matter of just pulling those calculations, but also seeing where they're coming from. You know, are they clustered here? Or are they evenly spread out? You know, it's usually interesting. The thing that I've seen in Lafayette's what I've seen in other parishes that have parish-wide programs, schools of choice magnet programs or whatnot, is that they're pretty well evenly distributed, and that's what we have over here. In fact, we did a survey, it's probably done in either 09 or 10, when we're looking at making the Thibodeau Tech the 5th high school, or the new high school, I should say. And we did survey, and it turned out that about 25% of the kids from each of the high school zones were the ones that we're looking at going. We had about, from Lafayette High, they're almost evenly distributed from those that exhibited interest. So, and it pretty much follows what we see on the others.
Just for my, it tracks his question a little bit. So Lafayette High, I see that it's going to go down to 1374, and I think it's wonderful. I think we need to do something to reduce the population at Lafayette High. But my concern is rezoning students who are zoned for the school while retaining students who are not zoned for, basically to make room for students who are not zoned for the school. So along those lines, are we able to further break out the head count to say, let's take one of my neighbors, for example, is in the Health Academy at Lafayette High. So if we move the Health Academy, he still retains the option to go to Lafayette High. So
Because he lives in the zone.
because he lives in the zone. So I'd like to see for each of the schools of choice, if we could, who's zoned for the school, because obviously that kid's in the 1374 right now. But so I want to see what the potential impact is for each of the programs versus the line, because I know, like you mentioned, Ambassador Cafferty, E. Broussard Road is now zoned for Como. So I'd just like to see that kind of information if we could.
Yeah,
Like-
actually staff gave me the codes
Okay.
for each of the students as to where they're coded on the schools of choice and academies and whatnot. So it's just a matter of breaking those out and showing you what the distribution of it is, and as well as accounts.
And the second question I had was, I've heard several stories, primarily from Mr. Latchley, about the day Prairie Elementary opened, they had Butler buildings on campus. This is what he's told me several times. Now, I use that, whether it's true or not, to say,
Well, I'm a little older than Mr. Latchley, and I remember when that school opened. And what you see now as Ambassador Caffrey was a gravel road. And I just remember it being perched up, literally looking like it's perched up on a hill. But I don't remember any Butler buildings there at the time. But I didn't go to that school either, but I lived in that general area.
Right. So my concern was
But it didn't take long to get Butler building, let me put it that way.
So my concern is seeing the 1342 number for the new high school and knowing that phase one is pretty much all that's guaranteed for the high school right now at capacity of 1,400, I believe. So I assume, and you're much more experienced in this than I am, and I know you said we'll get next year's data, we'll load it in and see if anything's changed. Is there any anticipation of reducing that number to leave room for growth?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
It's just a matter of finding the reason, a good landmark or road, water feature, something like that, in order to do that. It's even been hypothetically broached. Well, what if the high school was built in the Broussard area instead of the Youngsville area? What would it do to the zone? Well, a lot of it depends on where it would be located. Generally speaking, though, the zone that you see here would probably be shifted kind of counterclockwise, move away from the Johnson Street, East Broussard Road area, and kind of wrap around up more to take in the Broussard area. So that's how it would probably work if something like that was to be modeled. But with all the data in here now, it's real easy for me to go ahead and model different line changes, different locations, that kind of thing. So it's pretty straightforward to do that.
And the 715 does indicate the new zone.
Yes.
In the quadrants.
Yeah, those quadrants, that way Tony was able to kind of get an idea what kind of traffic patterns we're going to be affecting. And so he asked if I could do the counts. So those are actually the number of those red dots that you see within each of those triangles.
And so what you're showing us today is simply a proposed line to create a new zone for the new high school. You haven't looked yet at moving the zoning lines for any of the other high schools in our parish at this time.
I've done some modeling on that just to get an idea what the effect may be, but I haven't brought it to staff to finalize or have it set up to bring to the board quite yet. Kind of taking one step at a time.
Okay.
See what issues may be involved here that I'm not recognizing with the new zone. If there's none, then some of the models I've been working on are probably going to work out fairly well. If we make some changes, then that might affect some of the modeling or ripple effect into the other zones. So just want to kind of take it one step at a time and not get too far ahead of ourselves and cause a lot of confusion.
All right. And then my second question is, I believe, Mr. Hefner, that you've told me in the past at least part of the reason why certain schools of choice are at certain schools, and that was because those schools were decreasing in population, and one way to bring some of the population back was to put schools of choice there.
Yes.
Right, and part of it is from the DeSeg case that we had going on and to get unitary status. So the placement of the particular schools of choice at this time historically was because of population needs, and by that I mean the schools were emptying out because of aging populations in the community. So it was really kind of a simple matter of putting a school of choice there to invite people to come. So that's something.
It was kind of a two-pronged type thing. Early on, we made some changes. I mean, as far back in '86, when I was first on the board, that's when we moved or created the arts program at Alamo. It had dropped down to under 300 students. And so we set up the music and arts program over there that students come in, and that started building it up. Well, as the neighborhood's feeding into that, got new families, and you started having more zone kids coming. So that's why that population blossomed. Just like in '84, they had to move the Lafayette High line down to pick up more students to try to get that number up. Right? I mean, '75, that number was like 2,500 students. By '84, it dropped down to like 1,200 students. So some of the programs that we located, Lafayette High with bringing all the gifted and talented program to Lafayette High, part of that was budgetary, because in '92, '93, we're trying to trim the budget. Instead of each high school having their own gifted and talented, we moved them all to Lafayette High and centralized it. That helped Lafayette High's population. But the other schools of choice that came about largely as a result of our DSEG efforts were voluntary. And whereas those schools applied for and asked to be an academy, or they asked to be a particular school of choice, environmental sciences, or Montessori at the time for LEO. So those schools actually stepped forward and said, we would like to have this theme at this school. So the board granted them that opportunity to do that. And so it wasn't a matter of the board making a decision, well, we want to have a Montessori program, where we're going to put it. It was LEO's leadership at that time coming up saying, we want to have a Montessori program over here. Or Lafayette Middle saying, we want environmental sciences here because that's a good feed into the academy, the medical arts academy, which Lafayette High stepped forward and said, we would like to do a medical arts. Como was manufacturing and so on and so forth. So a lot of the academies and schools of choice that are there now, other than probably Alamo and Gifted and Talented and whatnot, were there because the schools stepped forward and asked to have those themes. So that's kind of a little bit of that background. And it really worked very well. Mr. Hidalgo, you had a question?
I was wondering, when do you think we can expect to see zones for all other schools, including elementary, middle, and the remainder of the high school?
We could probably, I mean, if y'all are okay with moving forward with this from a planning standpoint, as far as the this zone and with these numbers, then probably sometime at your March meeting, I can have, we can probably set up another workshop and probably have a little more discussion in it because it's going to be involving other school districts.
So are you suggesting and recommending that, as you know, the board take a look at this and approve it or not approve it, or are you suggesting that it just kind of get a blessing and move on, because you're going to be looking at the numbers again? So are you suggesting an approval?
I would suggest that the board adopt this as the model for planning, the planning model for the high school zone, and that we would refine it and have a final vote on it prior to the opening of the school in 2017. We would probably do that probably around this time in 2017 is what I would anticipate, because you're going to have enough time to let parents know of the change, as well as your staffing, and make those other adjustments, your bus routes, those kinds of things. But I think as far as the numbers go, I think it worked well. As far as the boundaries go, I think it works very well. So if there's really no problem or issues that you see right now with regards to this, and I'll look at what Ms. Centani was suggesting about maybe trying to get the numbers down just a little bit, give a little more wiggle room, like 1250, something like that. I can certainly do that. But by and large, if this can be the planning model that we work around, then that's going to make it easier for me to come in and give you the zone adjustments that I'll be, and the draft zone adjustments for the other ones, and then I can start working on those middle and elementary schools.
Well, I think considering all factors or potential factors in the coming months, this is a great boundary. So thank you very much. Last question for you. This looks pretty clear to me, pretty self-explanatory, but I'd like you to just touch on it briefly just to make sure I'm not missing anything. You have a box right up, you have two boxes here.
Mm-hmm.
The green box kind of demonstrates the geographic distribution of the students. Can you just briefly explain that?
Yep, I have it on the screen for the audience to take a look at as well. One of the things I decided to do, since there's a lot of this talk about what to name the school and whatnot, is that, okay, the answer to my question I have is, where are the students coming from? How many of them coming from the municipalities of Lafayette, Broussard, Youngsville, the census-designated place of Milton? Where are they coming from, and how many are coming from the unincorporated areas? So in other words, they don't live in any of the municipalities. Well, it was interesting, because I took those, where all those red dots are, and the ones that live outside of any municipality in that area is 632 of those kids, or 47% of your total. Broussard has 128 kids that live in Broussard proper, and that's 10%. Lafayette has 25, or 2%. And Milton has 117, or 9%. And Youngsville has 440, or 33%. That kind of gives you a breakdown of where your students are coming from.
Thank you.
Eric?
Mr. Everett, just one quick question. So, looking at the map, what were your thoughts on the area that would be east of Evangeline Thruway that's still in the green? what's the effect if you make that part of Como? The reason I ask is it anticipating that, I mean, it is Highway 90, very dangerous, but anticipating it becoming I-49 one day, that maybe it makes sense that the bus that is going to cross already for Como just goes a little further south to pick up those neighborhoods. I just kind of want to hear your thoughts on that one.
Okay, let me see if we got, the purple zone here is your Como zone. This is the Evangeline Thruway coming through right here. That's what you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the area on the east side of that? Okay.
Right, I meant, yeah, toward the south part.
Okay. Oh, right here, on that little area right there?
That little sliver,
This
right?
part. Okay. I did that mostly because of the way my census blocks, my student blocks that I had worked up. There actually aren't any students that I'm showing there. You see, you don't see any red dots. So I'm not showing any high school students there. So it's real easy to clip that right there on 90 and the Ambassador Caffrey interchange, and just keep it, everything to the east side. We can keep it either in Como, or we can keep it in the new high school zone.
Maybe
either
maybe
way.
that's an iterative discussion with Mr. Evans on transportation, you know, the impacts to the transportation, and if it makes sense to just send a bus on that side that picks up on the east side that continues up north to pick up the rest of Como.
Yeah, you currently, right now, any students that would be in that area, you'd be picking them up and bringing them to Como now as it is. So
Right.
it's really not a problem if you wanted to just clip it right there on 90, and everything that's on the west side of 90 goes to the new high school, and everybody else remains where they're going now. That is not a problem. We can easily make that adjustment. It's not going to affect your numbers to any degree, so it's an easy change to make.
Thank you. And I'm not suggesting we make the change. I just wanted to.
No,
know,
I think it
yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah,
Well, I was
Yeah,
gonna
it's one of those things that I looked at.
yeah.
I was gonna say, now that we have 5, I'd move that the board adopt this as the planning model moving forward.
I did have one more question. So when we go to phase 2 with the new zones,
Mhm.
we don't anticipate changing these zones in the short term.
No.
This zone.
I'll be working with your current student data that we have from the September of this year.
Thank you.
Those with the other zone modifications will be based on. So when we tweak, if we tweak this zone in 2017, we may end up tweaking maybe some of the others as well. But for right now, this gets us probably to third base as far as our planning goes. And between third base and home plate is where we'll make those changes in 2017. Any other questions? Staff or audience? No.
I think he was serious, Dr. Aguilar.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
When you're looking at the proposed plan right here and stuff, when you say the number of students for Lafayette High School is going to be 1374, and Mr. Centani suggested bringing it down to 1250, does that include just students that are zoned for that school? Am I reading this right?
Just zone students.
Okay, and he wants to bring that number down. What's the capacity that the school can handle for schools of choice? Y'all touched on schools of choice, but I'm curious, are y'all gonna be moving schools of choices around? 'Cause I think, that would matter to parents who are sending their kids to certain schools and stuff.
Yeah, that's something that the board's going to have to discuss. I think that's one of the things they would like to know is what the distribution of this, for example, the Health Academy at Lafayette High. Where are the students coming from and how many are there? How many of them are actually still living in the zone? How many of them live outside the zone? So I can work up that analysis for them.
I know, but when you're saying 1250,
Ms. Allen.
students and stuff, what's the capacity for Lafayette High School? When you're gonna throw in school of choice, what does that bring that capacity for any school, any high school, any middle school?
I have the
that has schools of
capacity
choice?
numbers. I don't have them committed to memory at the moment.
Okay.
But staff did, one of the things I do ask them for is the capacity. So we try to keep them within a comfortable capacity or a pragmatic capacity. Because unfortunately, you can shoehorn a lot of kids in, or you can have it where the core facilities work well, the cafeteria, administrative offices, library, they fit the number of students that you have at a school. And that's what we're trying to shoot for.
Okay,
But the numbers you see are based on the residency.
okay. And I just want to know how schools of choice fit into that. And I'm curious to know, how will this rezoning affect the schools that don't have, that are half empty? And this would apply for the middle schools and elementary when you do get to that, but I'm curious to know, how does it apply to that? Does it fill up those schools that would be half empty now, take the schools that are over capacity down to where they need to be? And does that change plans in the future for Lafayette Parish school systems to build new schools? If we're rezoning everything, does that take care of some of that problem and financial need to build new schools? They all need to be renovated, so we still need money for that.
Right.
But, you know, I'm just very curious about that.
And actually, that's the heart of why I think the board undertook this whole project, is to take a fresh look at all of our attendance zones, because they haven't been changed for quite some time, even though the population of the parish has changed a lot, but try to make the best use of our existing facilities. And if we can, if we have some underutilized facilities, try to make them more utilized and try to relieve some of the overcrowding, some of the others. So that's the general idea. How all of this is going to work,
Right.
we'll all be watching this together over the next few months, because we have elementary and middle school, as well as some of the high school areas that we need to look at.
And when y'all look at this, and I know y'all have a lot to still look at and stuff, the elementary, the middle school and all that, when are y'all projecting that the changes will go into effect? Because parents will want to know. I'm out of the school system, it doesn't affect me, but I'm curious for other parents, you know, and I'm sure they're very curious how it's going to affect their child.
Superintendent may have an answer on that. I know what we've discussed just informally, but I don't know if we're looking at a lot of these go into effect for 2017, or if we're looking at for some of them to come up for the 2016-17 school year. I think a lot, it just depends on what it is.
So I think it depends on how early we get consensus from the board about any rezoned moves. The high school's no earlier than 2017.
Okay? But this would give me a good idea on moving forward to bring some draft changes for middle school and elementary.
I mean, I would imagine that we have to have the high school zones decided by the time the school opens, right?
Oh, yes,
All right.
definitely. Unless you want to make it parish-wide school of choice. Any other questions? That's another agenda item. All right, well, I know you have a meeting coming up, but let me just ask, did you want to see the distribution on schools of choice? Eric? Yes, I can. Let's see if this is the one that I want. Let me find the map that I used. Bear with me. Oh, I'll tell you what, I have it in a PDF. That's a chart. Give me a minute, I'll find it. There we go. There we go. There's your elementary. Those are your elementary school zone, schools of choice. Leo are in the dark dots, Myrtle is in the green, Jay Wallace is in the purple. So that gives you an idea what your distribution is parish-wide for your elementary schools of choice. Yeah. Yeah, and I can give y'all individual maps of each of those as well, but you'll see as we come into it, Myrtle is in the green, J. Wallace is in the red or the purplish color, and then Leo is in the black dots. All these others are outside. Those circles represent the 1 mile that y'all going to be discussing later on this evening.
That's the amount of students at the school in a choice program also live in the zone.
You got it, in that 1 mile area. But you also see all the other dots of the ones that go to those schools and where they're coming from.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't mind, this is probably good information for you all. I think Mr. Hefner would like to repeat it thank you.
This is a map that I had worked up with the 1 mile walk zone, trying to get an idea of how many kids that were going to those programs that actually lived within 1 mile of that school. J. Wallace James students are kind of the red dot, Leo GDs are in the black dots, Myrtle Place are in the green. The circles that you see are the 1 mile radius from the schools. So this will give you an idea right here of how many of those, for example, Leo. In a 1 mile radius of Leo, all the black dots there actually live within that 1 mile. All these other black dots that you see scattered throughout the parish, they all go there as well, but they don't live within 1 mile. J. Wallace James, you see the red dots, those are kids that currently go to J. Wallace James that live within a 1 mile. And you'll see that there's a lot of other red dots as well. For example, J. Wallace is here, those apartments and whatnot, just to the east, you see there's a lot of red dots. This is Truman area. This is where Northside is located. So you'll see there's a lot that go to J. Wallace James that live right outside that 1 mile, but they still go to J. Wallace. Myrtle Place, since Myrtle's kind of new in that you've set it up as a French Immersion Academy, its dynamics are a little different. But you'll see a lot of them are in Myrtle Place because they actually zoned for it, and you haven't had that program as a French Immersion parish-wide long enough to pull a lot of kids from other parts of the parish, but they're all coming. You see green dots out here, out toward Dusson and Scott. You see quite a few of them toward Como and Milton and the south part of the parish, as well as some of them from the Caronico area. So that gives you an idea of just how diverse the population is attending your schools of choice. It's all over the parish. So, you're quite welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Hefner.
Mr. Knezik.
See that, or just this. Yeah. And as far as the high school zone goes, it can either be by official action or just that in the absence of any issues to the contrary, we'll move forward with what we presented. I mean,